All right. Good evening, everyone. Hope that for those of you guys who are playing in Philadelphia International slash World Open, you've made it back safe and sound. Um, I know a lot of you guys were at World Open, and so hope you guys had a good event, good experience. One thing that I noticed about this year is that the pairings were actually came out quite early compared to what it is used to. I was not playing. I played the Philadelphia National back home in New York. I got a round robin starting tomorrow. So when I see you guys next time, I'll have plenty of games for us to review. Funnily enough, I thought that actually I was giving my lesson next week. So thankfully, someone reminded me, and here I am. So I've got some positions from my Philly International events where I played 9 games. I ended up scoring 6 out of 9. I would say a fairly up and down event. Um, I played some good games, played some okay games, missed some chances, also got a little bit lucky in a couple of games. Only lost 3 FIDE. I'm now at 24-48. Um, Not exactly where I want to be, but also better than I was at the start of the year, so definitely not complaining. Um, as per usual, we're going to go through some of the critical moments from my games um, from the Philadelphia International. As per usual, I'll also be giving some context, and we'll kind of jump into these critical moments. So this first game from round one, Black Pieces against a around 2100 FIDE player, Mahir Patel. I think he's from Jersey. Um, and okay, I mean, as I've explained to you guys before, first round, you could say jitters or just sort of getting into form has been quite difficult for me in the past. I think I showed you guys one of my games from recently where I was just completely dead lost on like move four, I think it was, in what I thought was a field door, absolute disaster. And yeah, that was not a good event at all, or not a good game at all. And we have this one right here, game one, round one, Philadelphia International, and we have this position right here. Block to play. Um, it's been a normal rouser. I've played it relatively fine up to this point. Made some inaccuracies, but okay, we have a fairly imbalanced position, fairly normal position for what you'd expect from a rouser from a rouser. And we have our first stopping moment, which is black to play. Can black play d5? Should black play d5? We're not going to spend too much time on this one. As I've done in the past, I want to mostly explain my thoughts and some reasonings I have behind my moves themselves. Also, remember to send your chats or answers to me directly, which I've now forced you guys to in the chat. Um, so we'll spend, I think, let's do 2 minutes, it being our first kind of warm up position. 2 minutes, black to play. Can slash should we play d5? Give it about 1 more minute. Seeing some answers trickling in so far. All right. So once again, as I'm explaining, feel free to continue to send me your answers in, especially if you're typing it out right now. Let's talk about it, guys. And once again, explain my thought process and why I made a big mistake here. Now, D5, as we're looking at it right now, and as some people have pointed out in their answers themselves, is a fairly decent idea. It opens up the center. If white, let's say, was forced to play e takes d5, us being able to respond with knight d5, getting tempo on the bishop on e3, perhaps maybe even bringing the bishop to f6. One of the variations that I briefly was calculating was something like, d5, take, knight d5, bishop d4. Maybe we can get away with some e5 there and sacrifice the pawn, or just simply even castle. And okay, we get some activity. We open up the center. We can bring a rook to d8, line up with the queen. Like positionally speaking, strategically speaking, if we can play d4, then it would not be the worst thing in the world to have. It's d5, sorry. However, as we've seen in the past, and as many of you know, strategic ideas need to be backed up with full calculation, with concrete ideas. In the sense that if we're making such a huge, significant, important move like d5, a break in the center, a sort of initiation in the center, yes, we should ask ourselves if it's beneficial, if white takes, and all the other kind of variations surrounding that. But additionally, we need to make sure that white does not have any alternatives that could potentially punish us for haphazardly playing d5. And as many of you guys have pointed out, after d5, black runs into the very thematic, by the way, response e5. Now, a lot of you guys actually were trying to say that white should go bishop f4, followed by e5, but actually here I can respond with e5. One of the variations I saw, I think it was a couple people give, was pawn takes d6. But here I think I could probably go bishop takes and then queen takes c2, which I think I saw in a couple of variations was missed. And I think black is more than fine now. Probably is actually, yeah, okay, more than fine. Maybe white's doing okay because the king can't castle. But okay, this is not even close to the best variation for white in response to d5. So after e5, once again, I'll explain to you guys in a second what I had missed / kind of forgot about. I saw e5. In fact, I had seen e5 a few moves in advance. But after e5, queen takes e5, of course, being the natural response. Bishop f4, I saw this. Queen's getting kind of low on squares. We go to f5. White responds with knight d4. We have to drop back with the queen. The queen can't go to h5 because it'll get kicked with g4 yet again. So let's say queen h7. All right, already not looking so great. Bishop d3, queen g8. And well, in fact, one of the things that I kind of underestimated / just totally misevaluated and just carelessly kind of thought about was, I have g6 here, which is just completely, insane that I even thought like this. But once again, I'm explaining to you guys my thoughts. I'm explaining to you guys what I had reflected on during the game or what I thought of during the game. And first of all, it's just terrible. And second of all, there's simply h5, which is immediately crushing. So I thought I had g6 and queen g8, and then in my mind, as I was trying to justify the move d5, I was like, well, okay, sure, my queen's on g8, and I can't castle, But okay, maybe I'll go like some queen f8, bishop d6, and I mean, a pawn's a pawn. Um, and it's just awful. In fact, like let's not get into it too much, but it's like +3 here. White goes like rook he1. Ideas of knight f5 are in the air. I mean, this idea of queen f8, bishop e6 is just completely insane. Not to mention that white immediately is just crushing the queen a5. Like, these are the types of moves, sure, it's, let's say, easy to miss in advance, especially when we're thinking very carelessly. But these are the types of moves that just have to be there, quote unquote, have to be there, in the sense that, like, there's no way as black we can put our queen on g8, lose 3 tempo of white's pieces getting activated, not be castled, and our pieces are not like active at all. So a move like queen a5 should be expected. I should have just known. And the thing is that, like, once again, you guys, it was not a fact that I missed e5. I saw e5, I briefly calculated e5, and I carelessly thought that, like, oh, it'll be fine. And that's the thing, all right? Obviously, this was a huge miss. As I've explained to you guys before, part of it was just some first round jitters / carelessness, playing against someone much lower rated than me, and kind of just assuming it would all work out. And okay, technically I won the game, technically it all worked out, but it's these types of mistakes in critical moments that oftentimes define our losses to much lower rated players. I'm sure that no one in this meeting is exempt from having been upset from much lower rated players. And it oftentimes happens because our thought processes are even just so slightly tweaked, because we're being extra careless, because we think that everything will work. We just assume that it will work out. And we either miss or just misjudge very, very important moments that we otherwise would very, very easily dismiss. If I was playing against a GM here, I would see d5, I would see e5, and I wouldn't even think twice about going into that variation. I would just play like castles here, let's say, and just play it normally, right? But no, because I was being extra careless, thinking that anything would work out, right, that I could go d5 here, e5. And you know what's even more crazy about it? Is that part of my thought process was like, I mean, like, you probably won't even find e5 anyways, right? Which, by the way, is just completely absurd, because you should always expect your opponent to find good moves. You should never kind of, quote unquote, hope that they won't find good moves. And it just goes to show how careless and how little thought out my thought process itself was. Okay, so I definitely wanted to show you guys this moment to once again further reflect on my event, but okay, to explain just a little bit of the psychology of why I made such a huge mistake here. And hopefully that can help you guys in terms of your own reflections, your own mistakes that maybe might be similar, or at least the thought process itself might be similar. Now, that being said, after d5, e5, I actually spent 15 minutes here. Part of that time was trying to somehow make queen x e5 work. In fact, there was one point in that 15-minute thought where I almost just played queen x e5 out of pure frustration. But after realizing and admitting my just horrendous mistake, I played knight g8, which is not a move you ever want to make, because it, of course, admits you're wrong, admits that you just completely were being insane. But I want to briefly show you guys how I proceeded to eventually win this game. So white now understands the moment's there. White's much better pieces, and the hopefully for white, at least for my opponent, the attack will start coming. Right, better pieces, more space, initiative. Let's go. All right, so I played bishop b4, a little bit of a sneaky idea to develop my pieces with kind of some force to it. White can't take because queen c2, obviously. So white plays c3. I dropped my bishop back to a5, brought my knight to e7, exchanged my bad knight for white's good knight, and okay, the dust has quote-unquote settled, and white is crushing strategically. Better bishops, more space, safer king. All signs point towards white being much better, to which they are. However, there's still play left in the position. Black is not dead in the water, like my opponent thought. Which, I mean, I also thought. I was also feeling that like I had really, really messed up. But I persevered. I was extra resilient, and I was like, I'm gonna find my direction forward here. And not only that, I sort of foresaw some of White's potential ideas on the king side themselves, as well as the way that I would be able to create counterplay and not just kind of lie down and die here. Okay? So, black to play here. I didn't want to spend too much time on this position because there are various ways that black can play here which are kind of similar. And even objectively speaking, I didn't actually play the best variation. But the variation I went for gave me great chances to fight back in this game. So I'm curious to just see what your guys' thoughts are. As per usual, take a little bit of time here, send your answers in the chat, briefly explain them, give me some ideas. But black to play, how would you continue? How can we not just die lying down and show a little fight here? We'll spend no more than 2 minutes. Black to play. All right. So, seeing a lot of ideas, a lot of good ideas, and like I said, I just simply want to get you guys thinking in a more, you could say, aggressive manner to a position like this. My first instinct, as I've seen quite a lot of you guys actually put down, was all right. White has, the good bishop on e3. If we play bishop b6 here, and let's say make a trade, maybe we can play d4, maybe we can play b4. We can also just hopefully hold down the center and make a draw. Now, that's a pretty depressing thought, especially against someone 350 points lower rated than you. And so I was trying my absolute hardest not to go for this. But it is a valid thought. In fact, it is very likely one of the best ideas, practically speaking, if not actually objectively. But, as a lot of you guys noticed, okay, this is a Sicilian, yeah? How can we generate some counterplay? How can we fight on the queen side? And this is where actually I think that I came up with quite a nice idea. And a lot of you guys actually have noted this, at least if not exactly, quite similar to it. So I started with queen to b7. And white very naturally responded with a3, just stopping b4. All right? But okay, let's be stubborn a little bit. If we can't play b4 immediately, if we can't generate the play that we wanted to immediately, let's not panic. And let's be stubborn. In this case, try to be stubborn as much as possible. Bishop d8. Very straightforward. a5 and b4 is coming. Sure, white might beat us to it. But at least we can try to put some pressure on white. Go for this a5, b4 idea. open up the queen side. When the queen side open, our pieces will maybe come to life, and especially against a loaded player where they sense some pressure coming, and with a5, b4 on the horizon, now they actually have something to address. Now they actually have something to be aware of. And as a small extra note to that, the reason I chose d8 was for two purposes. One is that it could swing to e7 and support b4, but two, it also can control some of the king side in case some pressure is applied. And now I want to make one last comment on my opponent's end before we kind of show how the rest of the game played out. For my opponent, and actually I had a little bit of a post-mortem with him afterwards, which I think is very reflective of kind of sometimes the sort of misconception of, let's say a lower-rated opponent in a moment like this. He knows he's better. I know White's better, right? But for some reason, there's also a little bit of pressure of that to my opponent as well. Because now it's not just like, okay, be solid, make a draw. White knows he's better. White also sees the idea of a5, b4 coming. And so there's that extra kind of pressure mounting for White to be extra accurate and to play correctly. There's also nerves that come with that too. First round against a much higher rated opponent, what to do, how to be accurate. Well, definitely don't be blitzing out. Unfortunately for my opponent here, he did not really control the nerves too well. He knew he was better, but perhaps too much so. He thought he was crushing, which, okay, strategically he might be, but you still have to be accurate. You still have to take time. There are plenty of interesting ideas here for how White can play. White can go g5. White can go f5. White can try to play a little bit more prophylactically on the queen side somehow. But, it was not instantly. My opponent took a little bit of time. But he basically just thrusted the f-pawn, played f5. I played a5. And then he played f6. And then I took. He took on h6, so now he's got the passed h-pawn, as well as bishop g7 ideas. And okay, definitely the center / king side is opening up. I played b4. He took. He played bishop g7. And by the way, almost all of this was like blitzed out by my opponent. Remember, he can't take on b4 now with the queen because the bishop on h6 is hanging. So in his mind, this is all kind of forced. By the way, the computer comes up with some kind of crazy variations, such as like here, he should go like bishop g7, and then take on f6 and allow me to take on c3, which is, not easy already. So he took, played bishop g7, took on f6, allows me to take on a3, and plays bishop h7. By the way, a lot of this was just like almost blitzed out instantly, like less than 2 minutes max on a lot of those moves. And don't get me wrong, this variation itself was very tempting. It seems like what White has done is taken their strategically crushing position, played some natural ideas, some natural moves, and now has put themselves in a position to where they're winning material, they're even crashing through on the king side / center, and they'll win the game. But at the same time, they have allowed tons of counterplay on the queen side. I have crashed through on the b file, the c file, and even the a file. Yeah, maybe only my queen's in the game for now, but that's what you guys are going to try to figure out. I had, by the way, calculated this variation from far in advance, from when I had played like this whole bishop d8 a5 thing, and I knew that actually at this point I was already winning, basically. Unfortunately for my opponent, he didn't take the time necessary to have that sense. Remember, his thought process was better position, natural moves, crushing moves, win the game. And actually, once again, when we had that post-mortem afterwards, he was like, "Oh, what did I mess up? I was winning." And I was like, "Yeah, you were winning earlier." And he's like, "No, at the end, like here." He thought he was winning here, which once again just goes to show how his natural thought progression, unfortunately, had guided him in the wrong direction, right? And it's totally natural. Once again, it is natural, but that's the thing. We sometimes have to fight against, and once again, we're talking about from White's perspective now. We have to fight against what sometimes is natural to our thought process, our instincts. Our instincts are not always correct. Our instincts will sometimes guide us in the wrong direction. We need to harness those instincts, and in White's case, they should have calculated. They should have thought. They should have evaluated this position with not only just their instincts and their intuition, but actually variations, calculation, and through that calculation, a real decision. So the final stopping moment in this game, how do we continue here as black? Okay, how do we actually punish white for having not carefully thought out and calculated and gone through the right sort of thought progression or process beforehand? Very critical moment, of course. Things are hanging, things are opening up. Black must play accurately. So, more or less the final stopping moment. 2 minutes here. How do we continue? What do we think? Black to play. A lot of great answers so far. We'll give it around 1 more minute. Keep up the good work here. All right. So, by the way, unfortunately, they have changed the way that the Zoom like private chats work. It used to be where if you guys would send me answers, it would show up all of them in a stream of line, so I would see them one by one. And now when you guys send me private chats, it sends like bubbles. And so now I have like 30 bubbles, and I have to click on each bubble to see your guys' different answers. So that's why I'm a bit slower in responding than usual. And so apologies if I didn't get to your answers. I've seen most of your guys' answers, and so I'll kind of address some of the resources or ideas you guys came up with. Now, a lot of the ideas you guys came up with were, in the right spirit, perhaps bringing pieces in, making threats. Um, but there is one clear best way forward, and actually only one way that is clean and that wins. To address some ideas, which, by the way, a lot of these had occurred to me during the game even. One of them is or was bishop b5. I think this one was a bit kind of nifty in of itself because, well, okay, you're bringing one of your worst pieces into the game, and the main idea behind bishop b5 is if it takes g8, bishop d3, followed by opening up the a file. Like this is kind of a nice idea. I do think, however, I didn't fully calculate it, but white may be able to get away with queen takes d3. Because if you go b1 takes here, there's queen e3. So I mean, I think black's probably fine here, that there's at least perpetual, but not winning. But also the other point that I made to a couple of people who had mentioned the idea of bishop e5 is, for example, what if I were to go something like rook h3 too? Like bishop e5 in itself is just not that forcing. This rook h3 idea is quite strong actually towards a lot of black's ideas that are not the most forcing. I bring my own piece in to defend, cutting off the access to the d3 square, also threatening rook takes a3. And in the meantime, unfortunately, by playing bishop b5 itself, we've cut off the b file. And so even though bishop b5 does follow attacking principles, it also unfortunately does block the b file. It's not as forcing as we would like it to be. And unfortunately, it's just not the best. Some other ideas I saw, or for example, like rook to b8. But my one question for moving rook to b8 was like, okay, what if I just take on g8? I mean, queen b2 is not going to do it for us here. You're just not mating like this. Not enough pieces in the attack. And okay, if your idea was to play 8xb2, well then you should have done it at the first. Because if your idea is to open up the BA files and everything, then you don't need the rook on b8 to do that. In fact, we would more than welcome white to take on b2 here, because we could respond with like queen a8 with rook b8 ideas. But no, you guys, not forcing enough. We talked about attacking principles, yes? Bringing pieces into the game. Bishop a5. Bring pieces in the game. Good things happen. This is forcing. This is like very forcing, in fact. Right? The queen is threatened. The queen can't take on a5. And the queen has to move. So my opponent moved the queen. He moved to e2. But yeah, he moved the queen to e2. I want to address one last thing before we get into how this game ended, which is the fact that my opponents calculated up until bishop h7 and sort of like came to a loose evaluation and intuition that white was winning there. But not only did white miss some of my resources, white kind of trusted the intuition to such an extent that it made the decision for them. Their intuition and evaluation of that position literally made the decision for them. What we oftentimes see is that in complex variations that we're calculating, let's say 3, 4, 5 moves in advance, I mean, at some point, you do need to cut your calculation off. You can't calculate forever. However, the dust had not settled here. Black has plenty of ideas. In fact, as I was sort of pointing him out, I was pointing it out to him after the game, like I had multiple interesting ideas here. Like rook c4 is an interesting idea with rook b4 ideas. Bishop a5, of course, which I had played and is very strong. Bishop to a4, queen b3, rook b8, rook a8, pawn x b2. Like there's so many like interesting resources, and of course one that's the best, bishop a5. There's so many interesting resources that it's hard to just like look at this position and be like, yeah, white's winning. And that whole like thought of intuition, how intuition guides our thought process, is very, very critical. Because a lot of you guys, being intuitive players, I myself, I would say I'm more so of an intuitive player. It's what you do with that intuition which is very key. Because if you take that intuition and you solely trust that intuition, you will miscalculate things. And because you've miscalculated things, you will not make good moves. Or some of the times you will not make good moves. On the other hand, though, if you take your intuitive style and you try your best to harness that, meaning, yes, you know what your intuition is. You generally trust your intuition because that's your style. But you patch up those holes with calculation. You recognize those moments where you need to actually approach that position, whatever the position is, with both what your intuition is telling you to do and the calculation to back that up. That should be your thought process, right? You cannot just like blindly trust your intuition, oh, that feels right, and go in that direction. There has to be that process, that kind of comparison, right? Comparison of, yes, what your intuition is, but to all your other options, to your opponent's other options, to your opponent's resources. And so at the end of the day, this is unfortunately for my opponent what caused his demise. Bishop a5, Queen e2 was played, and as many of you guys mentioned, well, let's keep it up. Bishop c3. This is what, unfortunately, is crushing for black. The idea of bishop b2, which does not act as a cork for the b file, of course, because the bishop will then discovery. But then also another nifty idea of the fact that we have rook takes g7. For example, let's say white were to go rook d2. Bishop d2 would be okay, but probably not the best. At the very least here, black could take on g7 and take here, and still have the pressure on the queen side, and not even be down that much material. So bishop c3 is a very, very crushing move, probably one of the moves that my opponent had missed. And I think my opponent should have been more resilient, probably played something like rook to c1, rook to d2 here. But he played bishop g8. I played bishop takes b2 with threats of the discovery, of course, but also a2 check. King e2 fails to rook c3, among other things, actually. But rook c3, there's no way to stop queen b3 now, so mate is coming. He ended up just playing rook hf1, which there's mate in a couple of forcing ways, but I just chose queen to b3. Threatening mate on a2, he played queen a6, and bishop d4 was checkmate. Now, of course, was this a perfect game? By no means, right? For round one, unfortunately, this has been typical for me, and it's something that I need to work on in terms of not being careless, focusing on good moves, good decisions, no matter who I'm playing, and making sure that I don't let these external factors of tiredness or whatever else cause me to make suboptimal decisions early in the event. But okay, thankfully I turned around towards the end. Was able to reflect, of course, on why I played d5, what I missed, and those types of mistakes that have sort of haunted me in the past, and continue to show that in some cases in my games, and need to continue to work on moving forward. All right, so let's move on. A lot of good ideas and variations in what you guys have presented as we went through those stopping moments. And remember that, guys. Intuition is, of course, not a bad thing. But intuition being the thing you solely rely on and solely lean on, that can never be good, right? Maybe sometimes you'll play some good moves. Maybe sometimes you'll find some good ideas. But it cannot be the only way you come to decisions. All right, so let's move on to this position right here. Definitely one of my most my devastating loss of the event. I was started on 2 out of 2. Yeah, 2 out of 2. And in my third round, I was playing black against around 2200 feet. He actually ended up making an IM norm, had a great event. And yeah, was not even playing that well against me. I had a crushing position. I'm completely winning here. Completely winning. Played a very nice opening variation. Punished his suboptimal responses, and got to this moment where I knew I was winning. And I had like 30, 40 minutes in the clock, somewhere around there. Knew I was winning, had enough time. What should that mean? I should take my time, find the win, and go to the hotel room 3 out of 3. Instead, as I was mentioning you guys before, I trusted my instincts, trusted my intuition, trusted my short calculation, and as you guys will see, I somehow lost this game. So, black to play here. Stopping moment. The focus, the theme is conversion, accuracy. How do we see our opponent's resilient ideas and resources? And how do we stop them? Black to play here. Let's take 3 minutes. There are a few okay ways to move forward here for black, but only one way that is cleanly winning and that recognizes white's ideas, resources, and factors in calculation to the equation. So 3 minutes here, you guys, black to play. All right, about 1 minute, you guys. Only gotten a few answers so far. All right. So once again, we have to identify some of White's resources and ideas, and through that, find the most accurate way to convert. Through that, generate some options and ideas for us as Black. Now, when I had calculated into this variation, like I think it was 5 moves in advance, and I thought that I had Queen B6, which a lot of you guys had given. Queen B6 is like okay, but already is in the wrong direction. And I'll explain that in a second. I wanted to mention though, the first text I got was, I think you played Knight XD7. I am not that bad. That's not how I lost this game. So Knight XD7 followed by Queen A5. So I just want to mention that. I did not hang my queen. Thankfully. All right. I think I would probably quit chess if I did that. So no, I did not play Knight C7. My first intention was Queen to B6. And a lot of you guys had mentioned this variation of Queen B6, threatening Knight D7, as well as stopping Queen D6, which a lot of you guys correctly identified was one of White's resilient ideas. Queen D6, Queen E7. So Queen B6, Rook D6, and Queen C7. And a lot of you guys were like, yeah, great, this is good. This is what I had calculated. This is what I had thought too. But unfortunately, White has Bishop C6 here. A resource that in advance I had totally just missed. A very, very annoying one at that. Of course, the point being is that, like, you know, if we were to take on, if we take on D7, then it just fails to Bishop D7, I guess, because on Rook takes, so yeah, Bishop D7, and takes here is back ring. So that's one of the variations that I had missed. But actually, I just completely underestimated Bishop C6 first of all, and so thankfully I collected myself and didn't just blitz out Queen B6, but I forgot to consider really what White's ideas were, and on top of that, what my options should have yielded based off of that. So I ended up playing B3, which a lot of you guys had suggested, and technically is still winning. But actually, after B3, the computer gives Rook D5, which, by the way, I had seen, and I thought that I had B2 here, and I totally forgot that White could actually just go Rook to D1. So once again, trusted my intuition, didn't calculate, wasn't thorough, and this is one of the ways that White could almost actually equalize. My opponent ended up playing Bishop C6, and I'm still winning here, but I had to be now much more accurate. The cleanest way, which actually I'm very happy to see a lot of you guys have given, is, not B3, F6. Think about it. White's idea was Queen D6, to go Queen E7. So now after Queen D6, we go King F7. Not to mention that, okay, Queen D6 here, we could maybe even get away with Rook C7 as well. But the main idea is like, okay, on any Queen D6, we actually have King F7. And the queen just completely shut out. On Queen H5, and of course important, we don't get mated here, we can just go G6. And it looks shaky, but here's the thing. We're already up one pawn. If we stick a king on G7, as long as White can't infiltrate, the knight on C5 is a beast of a defensive piece. Not to mention, the D7 pawn is a sitting duck now. And so, if I had just simply considered F6, I would have 100% played it. And a lot of you guys very confidently gave F6 as the answer. and confidently you are correct. So unfortunately I played b3. Thankfully, I guess, my opponent played bishop c6. And okay, I continued with queen b6. They now went queen d6. And it was at this point where the string of miscalculations continued to flow. I played b2, which actually, by the way, I had spent some time on it, but just was incorrect. The reason I played b2 was after queen e7, which I had seen, of course. It was, once again, one of White's main ideas. I was going to go knight takes d7, with, of course, the idea that on bishop takes d7 now, I could just go b1. There's no more queen e8. There's no more mate. So that was my idea. But then I totally forgot that White can go bishop to e4. And believe it or not, the b1 square is covered. I'm up 2 pawns temporarily. But because of my back rank issues and the pin on my knight and rook, I actually am now already worse. In fact, I have to be very careful not just to immediately lose. So I had missed that. And so here, I should have realized the pawn is best kept on b3, for now at least. And I should have just gone g6, followed by king g7. We'll see later on why this is very important. But I get my king off the back rank, so there's never queen x d8 with check, or queen e8 with check. Additionally, there's no queen f6 cutting my king's entry to the g7 square off. And once again, we'll see later on why that's so important. And we actually now just basically say, all right, c6 bishop is potentially hanging, and one of Black's main ideas is a5, a4, and just push the pawn. And White does not have any resources anymore, and Black is now winning. So if I had calculated better, if I had considered my other options seriously, I think I probably would have found this, because I did play g6 later on. Because I played b2, and now realizing that knight c7 did not work, played g6. They played rook to b1. Now the threat of rook takes b2 is quite real. I played rook to b8, getting my rook off of the d8 square, and I completely forgot about this move, queen f6. So at this point now, actually, I had burned a lot of my time and made some bad moves. I had around 15 minutes on my clock, and he had around 6. And at this point in the game, I sort of realized that all of a sudden, a draw might be a fairly likely result. And I might have to, quote unquote, pull the plug and just sort of accept that I've played this incorrectly and go for what may end up being a drawish endgame. And that direction was queen c7. And one of the variations is like takes. I can't take immediately because of d8, and so I take on d7. And for example, he could take, and like this is like a drawish endgame. Probably I could still try to press, but actually the c pawn is quite annoying, so I think we'd probably make a draw. So I saw that, and I saw that like it was 2 results. But what annoyed me was that White has queen e7 here actually, and we're kind of back to square one. Rook takes b2 is a threat, and I might even have to go right back to b6. And so seeing all this, and well, of course wanting to still win, and being very stubborn because I thought that I was winning the whole game, and I mean I was, and I was actually not really even sure where I had messed up at that point, because obviously the game was still going on, so I was not necessarily reflecting on that just quite yet. I continued this careless calculation and thought process. I saw this move knight to d3, which of course defends the b2 pawn. And bishop b4, of course, is a very natural move. I had seen this, trying to dislodge my knight and get rook takes b2 in. And I had thought, and I immediately saw it right after I played knight d3, and it was just crushing, because now I'm already losing. I thought I had queen d6, and after bishop takes, queen takes, rook takes, queen takes, you get the same endgame, but they didn't have that possibility to go for the perpetual queen e7. So I had actually already admitted that I had made some big mistake earlier on, and that I would go for this endgame and just try to win. But, of course, in this whole variation, yeah, not so fast. And so miscalculation after miscalculation, after being stubborn and being stubborn again, just completely missed this continuation. And after bishop d3, I took on d7. I mean, I have to. I can't go queen c3 because after queen c3, rook takes b2. This d pawn is just gonna immediately win the game. I can't even play rook d8. Like I have to move. I have to go rook f8, and then you just go like rook to b7. I'm just dead lost. So I sacrificed the piece, and we were starting. And actually, my opponent was down to like 2 minutes, 1 minute, and we were starting to get closer to time control, 40 moves, where we get an additional 30 minutes. So we go c5, I go to b3. I'm trying to cause some problems as much as possible. He goes c6, and so now I actually traded into this endgame, a losing endgame, but okay. I mean, not so easy. And on move 41, he just made time control. On move 41, he blunders, and I seize that opportunity for rook b1. Here's the thing. He cannot move the rook off of his pin, and so actually before I'm able to play a4 and the pawn really starts advancing, he has to go bishop c6. Pawn advances, all the way to a3, and it's one of those endgames where my pawn quote unquote dominates the bishop in the sense the bishop can't leave one of the diagonals covering a2, and white's king will need to run all the way to a3 to take the pawn, and because I have a 4v3 majority on the king side, it's very likely, intuitively, a draw. Now, I wasn't 100% sure of this, but I had to go for this because if I kept the rooks on the board, he would eventually win the a pawn, eventually push his pawns forward, and it's a winning endgame. So, I go f5, I go king g7, this is all best. I go e5. He correctly realizes that if he went straight for the pawn, in multiple different ways, I can actually corral the kingside pawns, or at least get the f and g pawns and leave him with the wrong color h pawn. So he goes king d5. I now fix the pawns like this. I'm waiting for my break. All right, black to play, you guys. This is our final stopping moment of the day. Black to play and draw. You got 2 minutes. Black to play and draw. Give me variations. No one movers, you guys. In endgames, a lot of it boils down to calculation. How are you going to make the draw? One more minute, guys. Send in your drawing variations. All right. It is 8 o'clock Eastern time. Time to reveal the solutions. Now, I noticed a lot of you guys gave, of course, the best move, but you guys didn't really give the most resilient response for white, which kind of forces you to find the accurate draw, which is sort of what I had missed, which is why I lost this game. So g5 is, of course, the most natural move. I played king e6 just because, like, I was sort of panicking, and I realized a lot of these variations were losing, and like I actually thought for a second that I could just stay put and I wouldn't get in Zugzwang. But eventually white can actually put me in Zugzwang, which is why I have to commit to g5, which many of you guys gave. But a lot of you guys just gave h to g5 here, which is not at all resilient. Because white will go like this, black will go like this, with like this ideas. White's not even close to being in time. So white just waits. Because if you take here now, you're in the same Zugzwang. So if you go g4, same thing, in the same Zugzwang. So you have to go f4. And now here, okay, now we're getting close to drawn. Because we're getting very close to eliminating this pawn, and then this pawn, and now it's draw, yeah? So white goes pawn takes f4. Because, okay, if you take this, you lose. So pawn takes h4, this is all forced. Takes, and now it actually looks like you only have these h pawns, and now the worst thing has happened where we've given white the f pawn. Because we wanted them to have the h pawn, but now they have the f pawns. h3, king f3, and the move that I totally forgot about, h4. It's a very common theme, this is, where the king actually is boxed out. And we, of course, don't ever move these pawns, because then the king could come in. And now we just stay put. These pawns dominate the king. This king covers this pawn dominates the bishop. Draw. And so you might ask, well, what does this change? This is how the game went, by the way. g5, and my opponent, after spending 10 minutes here, found the winning continuation, bishop d5. Wait, why don't I just go for this? Bam, king d3. The king does not go and be passive to these pawns. The king now goes for its duty of collecting the a pawn. I'm not in time to win by pushing the pawns. And if I go straight for the king, this bishop and pawn dominate my pawn. I try with king to e5, but my king is just way too slow. Way too slow. And if my king ever even tries to advance, f4 and the f pawn wins. I'm not even close to being in time to coming here and to advancing and having h1. It's not even close. And that's how it was. So, miscalculation after miscalculation, misstep after misstep. It was awful play, unfortunately. From what should have been completely crushing, ended up losing. And, okay, that's one of the main reasons why I actually lost rating the event. I actually ended up coming back, was 4 out of 5, and I drew a wonder. So it actually was kind of amounting to be a fairly good event. And, okay, I had some interesting last games, some shaky moments, and, okay, finished on -3 FIDE, which, when all was said and done, was not too bad. Especially from having such a devastating loss early in the event. And I was thankful that I actually turned myself around and played some good chess after that. All right, well, I will see you guys soon-ish. I'm planning to turn this coming week, and then we'll see when the next class will be. I think on the calendar I'm set for the 21st. So I will see you guys then. All right. Take care, everyone. Best of luck in all of your summer events, and I'll see you guys in a couple weeks.